Hello and welcome to episode 328 of Retro Encounter, RPGFan's weekly podcast of many topics. I'm Mike Sollosi, and listeners, maybe you've noticed a pattern in the past couple of months. I am bringing back a concept from Retro Encounter of years past and doing a new take on it. This time it is the Adaptations episode, the third of which is we're going to talk about in a second, with the first two of which were in 2018 and 2020. I was in that 2018 episode and it was a lot of fun, and we decided to bring it back for 2022. But let's introduce the panel first. Returning from the 2020 version of the Adaptations episode, Audra Bowling.
Hello, hello.
And brand new to Retro Encounter Adaptations, Wes Iliff.
Hey, everybody.
Audra, Wes, myself, we have a lot to discuss, but the gist of it is we're going to talk about our some of our favorite intellectual properties, be they from literature, film, other video games, something else, and discuss what would be a dream adaptation of that IP. And we're going to try and avoid stories that we've used in the previous two RPG Adaptations episodes. And we're also fitting in this episode with a written feature about the same idea that should be we haven't finished posting it on the website at time of recording because we're recording this a little bit in advance. But around the same time this episode airs, there should be a written feature that's something like, something like 20 concepts written by about 15 writers from RPGFan that it's definitely will be worth a read once it's ready in its finished form. And this episode is meant to accompany that somewhat. So, and the previous two episodes weren't exactly the same, but the idea is each of us, we're going to go around the horn and each of us present an idea of a intellectual property or some story or some fictional universe that we love, that we would love to have to playable as an RPG, and then maybe an idea or two about what kind of RPG it might be. So, do we understand the concept?
I think so.
Yeah, sure do.
So, who wants to go first?
So I have one property on my list that is a previously existing video game, has been out there. You could arguably say some RPGs have been made of this property, which is Romance of the Three Kingdoms, and specifically, Koei's Dynasty Warriors take on Romance of the Three Kingdoms. Now, there's an argument that can be made that I've made in the past for Warriors games being like action RPGs in their own way.
Yeah, we have covered a couple of them on RPGFan, but I think it's because we had a writer specifically interested in talking about them as RPGs.
And a few of the spin-offs like Persona Strikers and Dragon Quest Heroes 2 are like meant to be RPGs. Like they are advertised as action RPGs.
Like Fire Emblem.
Yeah. Anytime they have an RPG property, they're like, okay, let's make this a proper RPG.
We covered this as well. But these Koei quote warriors unquote games are sort of all in the same Muso family that really started with Dynasty Warriors, and I don't know, maybe Kessen is Kessen before Dynasty Warriors?
Yeah, I think Kessen was close, but I think it was after, because the original Dynasty Warriors, the franchise started with it'd be Romance of the Three Kingdoms and Dynasty Warriors on the PS1, which was a fighting game.
Right, Kessen was a PS2 game. So my Koei timeline. We'll talk about Toei later, I promise.
Yes.
My Koei timeline is a little twisted, but please continue.
Yeah, Koei loves Romance of the Three Kingdoms, and there's a good reason. It's a really interesting, historical, legendary, fictional, sort of in between a whole bunch of things story with all of these like grand characters. And Dynasty Warriors has done such a good job of making these over-the-top characters into fan favorites. So you can latch on to one or two of your favorites and really learn to love that character. But the closest they've ever come to an RPG is a game called Dynasty Warriors Godseekers, which was a tactical RPG, and it took the same tack that so many games take, and that it's like this fantastical version where everything crosses over and there's alternate histories and there's a magical angel who makes all of the plot happen. And that's not what I want. That's not like the property that I'm looking at. I want that traditional Romance of the Three Kingdoms story, but in like a proper meaty story-based turn-based RPG where like lengthy cutscenes going in depth about these characters isn't out of place, and where like you can even just focus on a single one of these three kingdoms and really drill in, because there are certain kingdoms that you can make an entire RPG off of just a part of the major characters, in that kingdom.
All right. Now, I only know a little bit about Romance of the Three Kingdoms, but it's one of the I want to say 4 Chinese novels that is studied incredibly intensely, like the same way that Western cultures might study the Iliad or the Odyssey, and it has been told and retold in film and video game and other adaptations so many times. There are hundreds of characters, and the Dynasty Warriors games have been, oh boy, I want to say, including the Legends and Empires spinoffs, there's been maybe 25 of them.
Yeah, and maybe a few
Oh,
more.
wow.
Depending on how you count it, there are even more spin-offs.
Right. Yeah. And again, there's um, I think the Japanese title is Son Goku Muso, or
Yeah,
roughly Three Kingdoms Infinity, or whatever Muso means. But then
yeah,
you have Sengoku Muso, about the Sengoku period in Japan, and then we mentioned some of them, but in an insane number of spin-offs. It has sort of become almost the series or the kind of game that defined Koei to a degree. But
yes.
like replacing those really really silly short cutscenes from Dynasty Warriors with sort of more like story focused, plot focused cutscenes that's maybe focusing on only one kingdom or a small group of characters would probably serve that game better, because I
Yeah,
almost feel like when I play Dynasty Warriors at a friend's house, because I've done that many times, but I haven't really gotten deep into any of them solo. Uh, they sort of assume you know more than what the game is telling you,
yes,
and just throw 75 characters at you and sort of have an idea of what they're about without it's always confusing to me, and I could probably explain the plot of 8 fighting games more than I can explain the plot of a of Dynasty Warriors. But they are fun, and
yeah,
especially if you don't really get weary from, I don't know, picking Lubu and swinging a giant halberd, hitting 20 soldiers at once. I don't think Lubu should be the star of this game either. Like, if anything, Lubu is a mid game boss that's a little bit too hard for being a mid game boss kind of vibe. But Wes, do you imagine this being adapted by Koei and that team, or having someone else hit it?
I think they're capable of it, but I think there are other teams that would do it better. And it's hard for me to sum it up, who would be the right fit. Unfortunately, not something I pre-thought about. Because the big thing with them is that they did start with like this story focused approach. In Dynasty Warriors 7 and Dynasty Warriors 8, there's a little bit more, and the cutscenes that they put out are pretty solid, but they still, like you said, they expect you to understand some of it already. They expect you to meet them halfway, and don't necessarily introduce every single character perfectly, but they've shown that they can do it, and they've shown that they can make like competent turn-based games with the number of tactical games and whatnot that they've made. So I think leaving it in their hands would have the benefit of like it'll still feel like a Dynasty Warriors game. You'll still have those designs, those animations, those looks that have kind of made it something of a household name.
Well, all right. Audra, do you have any feelings or thoughts about Romance of the Three Kingdoms or Dynasty Warriors?
Well, I've always been curious about the games, so I would love to play an RPG adaptation. That would be my take.
All right. Well, that's Audra's take, but let's go with one of Audra's ideas for an RPG adaptation. Go us and come at us with one of your ideas.
Okay, well, actually, I was thinking of a graphic adventure or VN adaptation of this next one, which is a Chinese animation called Link Click.
Okay. Now, of all the ideas written down we have for this episode, this was the one I knew the least about so far.
Same.
So please explain to us what Link Click is a little bit before going into your adaptation idea.
Okay, it's basically it's about two guys and their landlord agent lady who they have a photo studio that is basically a front for the fact that the two guys have supernatural abilities that allow them to see into photos and actually travel back in time using them. So they pick up clients using their agent, and she gets photos for them to go into and basically possess someone in the photo for 12 hours. And they uncover some kind of mystery for the client that they have to solve. without really trying, but they also have rules, like they can't try to change too much of the past because bad things happen if they try to do that. And so it's really an interesting concept that I think would work well for a VN, especially a mystery VN.
Yeah, that almost sounds like a VN concept already. It's such a good fit.
Yeah, jumping into photos almost like they're Mario 64 paintings, but having them, be about timelines and mystery focused. And like you could easily just have each client be a chapter of the visual novel, so they could be semi standalone. I totally see this fitting a visual novel very well, despite knowing extremely little about the actual. What did you say this was? Was this an animation or a comic?
Animation.
It's an animation. Yeah, I despite knowing nothing about the anime or animation, I can see that idea fitting.
And time travel leads you to so many like really good bad endings in a visual novel, which is like half the fun for me in any VN is seeing all the horrible ways it can end and avoiding them.
And the first season really goes on a cliffhanger ending involving that, because they find a killer who actually can travel through photos too.
Oh, awesome.
So that definitely would fit for a good graphic adventure. That would be quite thrilling.
Oh yeah, and you see like you like feel the presence of someone else in chapter 1, then that person commits a murder in chapter 3, and then you have to confront the killer in chapter 5 or 6. Oh yeah, I can totally see myself playing this thing for 40 hours. Absolutely.
Yes.
Yep.
I'm also, I'm looking at a couple of pictures now, and the art style is really striking. And that's such a good fit for visual novel for my money, where like you don't have to compromise the artistic vision by trying to render it in 3D a lot of the time with visual novels. So it would really pop.
Yes, it would be awesome.
Well, when Spike Chunsoft definitely adapts this into a visual novel in 2024, I think you should send some very strongly worded emails and try to get your cut, Audra.
I would too. They would be perfect for it.
That was that was the first one that came to mind for me. Mm-hmm. Something like a Zero Escape or a Somnium Files adapting this actually sounds super dope.
Yes.
But all right, thank you for introducing me to Link Click and definitely trying to find some sketchy torrents of it in my near future. I'm going to go into my distant past for a while. One of my favorite series of novels when I was very young, let's say elementary school through middle school, were Brian Jakes' Redwall and Mossflower books. Now, I don't know how familiar you are with these, but he wrote at least 20 of them, and I lost steam. I don't know which number it was, but I'm pretty sure the last one I read was called Tagarung, which gives you an idea of how many made-up words Jakes did strew throughout all of these books. But it's about communities of small animals. Generally, the mice, squirrels, otters, badgers, and rabbits are the good guys, while rats, weasels, ferrets, and a few other pest animals are the bad guys.
Oh, wow.
But basically, living in this world of centered around a building called Redwall Abbey and a fortress called Salamandastron, where various mice and other animals go on adventures. There's there's not really magic, but there is sort of a sense of destiny and some supernatural elements in it. But mostly it's about the large scale struggles of animals living in a semi medieval world. And the first book is called Redwall. The second book is called Mossflower, and it gets Redwall's the name of the abbey that a lot of the mice live in, and Mossflower is the name of the general region where most of the books take place in. And again, I read so many of them. I'd have to check a list to see how far Tagarung is down the list, but they all have completely wild ideas. There's one where they're looking for 7 special pearls that are being hunted down by a pirate fleet of sea rats. There's one about a badger lord of the fortress Salamandastron who has a long lost twin brother and both of the brother badgers are trying to kill the warlord that killed their parents. It gets
oh wow.
Yeah, the drama gets insane in these books, and I thought they were the coolest thing in the world for several years. And for a while, like one would come out every year and a half or so, and I read all of them until I sort of lost steam. But I would, like, if you took any of them or maybe two of them that were connected, I would play a video game of them. It would, like, ideally it would be stylized 2D artwork that were
Yes.
that sort of resembled watercolor paintings, like the covers of the books that I really loved as a kid. Um, I wouldn't care much about the canon of the books because the canon is pretty loose in them. Like, there is a timeline, but like what's vaguely defined of the as the area south of Mossflower is like is wildly different in like three of the books, which always frustrated me as a kid. It's like, why is the Deep South different in Legend of Luke versus Matameo versus Long Patrol? It's like, you get the idea. Like, I would not care deeply about the canon or which book gets adapted, but I think that it's so ripe for a video game adaptation. I would be very interested in anything. But have any of you read any of these books?
I have shelved quite a few of them at the library, and they look really interesting for fantasy reads. So I've been very curious about them.
Yeah, I've never read any of them, but like it's hard to avoid. Like, if you're a certain level of like involved with books, Redwall is gonna come up. So like, I've seen those covers. I've done some research, and what interests me about this idea, not only is it freaking amazing because Redwall as a setting, like, even removing the stories from it as a setting is really compelling, is that there's a series that has always been kind of heavily compared to it called Mouse Guard. That was a graphic novel series. But kind of more pertinent to what my knowledge is it inspired a tabletop RPG that is much beloved, called, by the same name, Mouse Guard. And it always felt to me like everyone I've talked to who loves Redwall, who's played it, has mentioned how this feels like the closest you get to a tabletop Redwall game that like fits really well. And some of the mechanics behind it, the way that characters work in it, have always made me think like, yes, there is a lot of room for like a proper Redwall RPG that people could really get into, especially like, you could make your own characters in these games and have a blast, like in character creator.
Oh yeah, geez. Like, I wonder if you make your main character a mole, if you have to do mole speak, because mole speak in these games are written very phonetically and really hard to understand. Like reading mole speak as a child made me completely prepared to read any number of as accents. Reading books aimed at adults. And I should mention, there are some Redwall and Mossflower games. They are vaguely visual novel-esque, but they're not what I want. What I want is a just beautiful RPG with a lot of dialogue that feels like the books that I loved as a kid. And I think that could happen. I don't know what would be the right studio or right kind of game for it, but I sort of envision something like the UbiArt engine that something like Child of Light.
Ooh.
that has a watercolor look and a storybook kind of vibe, but with mice and rats engaged in epic duels and looking for the lost sword of Martin the Warrior. Like, that's what I want.
Maybe a more forgiving Tales of Iron.
Maybe. I'm not demanding this be a difficult, challenging game that tests my wits, but just a storybook RPG that feels like the books, that isn't one of the sort of low budget Steam adaptations, is something I'd be very interested in. But and yeah, I'm not surprised you shelve a lot of these at the library, Audra, because I think I'm making up numbers a little bit. I think there are at least 20, and I've read something like the first 12 or 13.
Yeah, I think there's even a cooking book.
Yeah,
which is interesting.
They do describe feasts lavishly in those books. Like,
okay, now you've sold me.
No, almost every time there is a scene in one of the books that will make me hungry, because they just describe I don't know. And again, keep in mind, these are mice and hedgehogs and stuff. Like, they describe the honey wine and all the stuff that they're eating and drinking. I think they're mostly vegetarian, other than maybe pescatarian. But they do food very well in those books.
This definitely sounds like a book series I'm going to buy, quote, for my daughter, and then read all the way through.
Yeah, go for it. And you can almost jump into any of them and start reading. A couple of them are direct sequels, but most of them are like, yeah, there's Redwall, there's Mossflower, the hero from 100 years ago is Martin the Warrior, blah, 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 go for it. So yeah, that was me reminiscing about one of my favorite series of books from my childhood. Let's just keep the same order. Wes, what's the next game or property you want to talk about?
I think I'm going to left field this by bringing up the only property based off of a podcast that I think we'll be featuring today. But this is one very rare excuse for me to talk about the Adventure Zone, which is a podcast by the McElroy brothers of My Brother, and Me fame, where they play D&D with their dad, is essentially the premise that they came up with. And it started out very much like they make a comedy podcast, and this started out very much as a comedy podcast, where they were running through like one of the pre-generated D&D modules. But very quickly they realized, oh, this is a really good way to tell stories. Veered way off of it and went into this weird, like, multi-dimensional story that is really at its core like this heartfelt story about characters dealing with, you know, traumatic pasts and huge events that are like galaxy spanning but boil down to the feelings of individual humans that kick this off. And like as a storytelling arc, I've not seen many do it better. Even in the crowded realm of like Critical Role of D&D, you know, streams and podcasts and whatnot, the Adventure Zone has always stood out to a particular kind of person just because it's such an empathetic story. And it's actually done, you know, a number of different campaigns at this point. I love most of them. Amnesty changes up for a Monster of the Week formula, like Buffy. Most recently, Ethersea is this crazy underwater adventure that they have going. But I think the original Balance arc is kind of where you get the most love. It has, you know, a best-selling graphic novel. It's got the podcast that still does numbers, you know, constantly. But it's got this core cast of characters, not just the main player characters, but they build up this retinue around them of allies that are like this perfect RPG party that you can build up. And just being able to like live with those characters, especially because they have a home base called the Bureau of Balance, where they go back and they interact with these characters in between. They do what are called lunar interludes, as this is kind of a moon-based situation. It's a lot to explain. Go listen to the podcast if you want to understand it. But it gives you these. Okay, I was going to try so hard to avoid this, but almost like Persona-like downtime moments where you can go and bond with these characters and get to know them outside of like combat, making this. You know, it doesn't necessarily have to be a combat-focused RPG, although the combat is always fun because it's these wild spell effects and wild environmental interactions that they do as a part of the show that would be wonderful to adapt into a game as best as you could.
So it's called the Adventure Zone, but they are not always adventuring 24/7.
They are not all adventuring. The zone is made for adventure, but there are little pocket zones where you can go chill for a bit.
There are spaces. There are spaces between the zones.
You know, no one can adventure 24/7. That's just too much.
Yeah.
I don't know. Adol Kristen tries. But,
he really does. But, you know, sometimes he's unconscious because the ship got wrecked or something.
Oh, yeah.
That's true. And sometimes he falls out of the sky and becomes unconscious. But yeah, enough about Adol Kristen and East. I am a little familiar with the Adventure Zone and My Brother, and Me, and them McElroy boys. Mostly because of other podcasts. The three of them are almost the definition of podcasters that became successful without, you know, they weren't like a comedian turned podcaster or an actor turned podcaster. They are podcast ass podcasters.
Yes.
And I've seen them show up in a lot of places. And I don't know if maybe the Adventure Zone was a progenitor of this, but tabletop RPG or D&D based podcasts have become very popular over the years. You mentioned Critical Role, which is one of the biggest ones. Matt Mercer, the popular voice actor, is the main DM for it, and it even has a Netflix animated adaptation that's either out or coming soon.
Yeah, it just came out.
I've started watching that one. It's
pretty
good.
Yeah, Netflix is pretty good, casting a wide net of influences.
It's Amazon, actually.
Oh, it's Amazon Prime? My bad.
Yeah,
but yeah. I all of the streaming services conflate a little bit for me.
They do.
And there's one that I like.
There's too many of them.
Yeah, exactly. There's another one I like called Friends at the Table. That's
I love Friends at the Table.
Austin Walker. Yeah, Austin Walker of Waypoint, formerly of Giant Bomb. But so like that kind of podcast has become very successful. The Adventure Zone is one of the most popular ones, headed by, I think their story is the McElroy father was a long time like radio producer.
He was, yes.
So his three kids almost grew up and like having dinner table talk discussions that were basically talk radio back and forths. So
Yes.
they were almost groomed to be radio men or podcasters their whole lives, and and their careers are what we're enjoying now as the result of it. Maybe that's maybe a little unfair to them, but there's a backstory to why they're so good at what they do.
And it's fascinating overlap because like the oldest brother Justin is one of the founders of Polygon. Griffin, the youngest, had written for there. He's the source of the famous after Sea of Thieves was announced, eating a banana whole GIF, with the skin on. That's his claim to fame. And they actually have a lot of connections to these other people because Adventure Zone wasn't quite one of the first, but it was on that rising wave before it was really prominent. So like they were heavily inspired by Friends at the Table. They got a lot of inspiration for their second campaign from that. They've done things with Austin Walker in the past, and they've actually had like side episodes and bonus content like DM'd by Matt Mercer. Like they have all of these intersections with those groups. But the core story of Adventure Zone for my money has always been the most pure, like this is storytelling, this is an edited, focused, like it's very different from like a Critical Role style. This is very much watching friends play a game and collaboratively enjoy each other's company in a way.
Well, awesome. That was the Adventure Zone idea pushed forward by Wes, and also spun off into a discussion of D&D or RPG podcasts that I think was warranted given the topic.
Yeah.
But Audra, what's your next idea for a hypothetical RPG adaptation?
Oh, it would be an action RPG adaptation of the classic anime manga Cyborg 009.
Okay, now I have a lot of thoughts about Cyborg 009, but Audra, please tell us a little bit about it and what you think an RPG of it might be like.
Well, it's about 9 people who are, against their will, turned into cyborg soldiers by a nefarious underground criminal organization called the Black Ghost, which they all have different abilities, and they're trying to stop Black Ghost and other criminals from basically doing nefarious things. Is pretty much their main MO throughout most of the series.
It's a very traditional kind of superhero-esque setup.
Yes. And I could just so see it working as an action RPG, especially like if you went with Falcom, maybe even doing a Ys 9 type situation.
Because you do have potentially 9 playable characters that all have very specific different silhouettes, abilities, attitudes, everything.
Mm-hmm. So you could really make player parties that are just full of interesting abilities and unique personalities, and see how everyone gets along, and it would just be fun.
Now I'm gonna go a little bit inside baseball here.
This was coming.
This was. This is, I think, the oldest property on our that we're going to discuss today. Cyborg 009 is a manga originally from the 60s, written by Shotaro Ishinomori. And Shotaro Ishinomori went on to become the creator of Kamen Rider and Super Sentai, which are, again, 2 of my great obsessions. So, of course, I knew a little bit about him. And he's also one of the most prolific manga writers ever. I think his total collected works is something like 300 volumes.
It's massive.
It's insane how much he's written over the decades. And he started out as an assistant to Osamu Tezuka, the creator of Astro Boy and a bunch of other stuff. Tezuka is considered like one of the great grandfathers of manga and anime. So Ishinomori is an incredible pedigree, and Cyborg 009, I think, was his first big series or his first long running series after he was no longer Tezuka's assistant. And again, it's had multiple anime adaptations over the years. There was a 2000s one that I know aired on Cartoon Network for a while.
Yes, that's where I first watched it, actually.
I think that's where most of the West was exposed to it.
I think that is also how I first watched it, because I didn't even get into reading disgusting amounts of online manga until I was at university in the mid 2000s. But the fact that they could easily either adapt an existing Cyborg 009 story or make one up out of thin air, and have 9 playable characters, each of them having a couple distinct abilities, maybe have missions or dungeons like focused around one member, and then you get to choose the rest of the team going into that mission.
Yes.
There's again, made the comparison to Ys 9, where you have 6 playable characters, each of whom has like a specific movement or navigation ability that's and the dungeon where you first use each character in East 9 is sort of focused the dungeon where the gliding guy joins you. There's a lot of gliding, like that kind of
Yes.
idea. Like having Cyborg 009 missions structured around specific characters and giving players some freedom in team design and combat design, that does sound really really interesting. And I'm not a mega fan of Cyborg 009, although I am a mega fan of some of Ishinomori's later works. uh, I would be very interested in playing a game like that, let's say.
Yes.
And I think gameplay wise, this might be the most powerful suggestion on the list in a lot of ways. Like, this is such a good fit. Like, it's such a good pull.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, having like distinct fighting styles, distinct like get around the world abilities for these 9 characters that are so distinct and interesting, plenty of inter-team drama that could fit the story. It totally makes sense. I'm not sure how many existing Cyborg 009 games there are. I imagine there's at least some, but an action RPG structured that way sounds super cool.
I'd play that in a heartbeat.
I would hope Falcom would do it.
Falcom is they're a very busy studio. Let's get a little specific with my next idea, because this is an extremely specific IP that requires a little bit of explaining. I'm a big fan of the card game Sentinels of the Multiverse, which has a card game. It's a card game with about a dozen expansions, and almost all of them are playable in a digital version on Steam and on mobile. So it's a very fun card game, and it's a solo or co-op card game where you basically choose, each player, or if you're playing solo more, you can choose more than one deck, chooses a hero deck, and you choose a villain deck to play against. And during the hero turns, you use powers and abilities and things that are characteristic to your hero. And during the villain turns, you just overturn the top card of their deck and do what's on the villain deck. So like you don't need someone to play the villain. You can have a co-op mission against a villain, or sort of just play solo against a villain. Do you understand what the concept here? It's like a Magic the Gathering or a deck building game, like I don't know, like Marvel Legendary, but it's strictly co-op.
Wow.
And it's based on an original superhero universe, not anything from DC, Marvel, or an indie group. But this is one thing I think is very amusing about Sentinels of the Multiverse. They have a lot of comic book covers that they do to introduce characters. Like here's the cover of I don't know, Legacy #1, but they don't actually have full comic issues. Like there's they don't have comics of the Sentinels of the Multiverse, but they do have fake comic book covers and descriptions that build the world a little bit. And in the later expansions, they have some villain decks that are that are former good guys in previous expansions, and some hero decks that are former bad guys in previous expansions. It gets real crazy. And the Steam version of the game that I have has, I don't know, at least 15 hero decks and probably 10 villain decks, and another 10 or so environment decks. It gets out of control. And they recently did a Kickstarter for a sort of remastered version of the first couple expansions that my best friend is buying all of, and I will play with him eventually once we're more comfortable being able to be in the same space again. Sentinels of the Multiverse has a rich superhero universe with a lot of cool ideas for villains and heroes, and my vision for an RPG based on them is a game I know one came out recently, but I really really love the old X-Men Legends and Marvel Ultimate Alliance games.
Oh, my heart.
Oh,
Yeah, and I haven't played the recent one. I haven't played the third one, but the first 4, X-Men Legends 1 and 2 and Marvel Ultimate Alliance 1 and 2, are just a blast because they're action games pulling from a bunch of corners of the Marvel universe. Like X-Men Legends 1 is kind of the 70s X-Men origin story. X-Men Legends 2 combines a bunch of 80s and 90s storylines like Savage Land and Age of Apocalypse. But they are about celebrating Marvel's diverse collection of superheroes and throwing as many, some A-list, some obscure villains as they can into one game, with fundamental gameplay that's pretty good and with a little bit of loot collection sprinkled in. Marvel Ultimate Alliance 2 kind of has the weakest story of the whole group, but has amazing co-op powers that are hugely entertaining to play in multiplayer. if I could play a Sentinels of the Multiverse game, that's an action RPG that feels a little bit like those old school X-Men Legends games, because X-Men Legends 2 is my favorite of the whole lot. I would play the hell out of that.
Oh yeah, that would actually be really fun.
You've got me on every level of this, because here's the thing, Mike. We found another thing that we overlap on, because I love Sentinels of the Multiverse so much.
It's
I've
so
actually
good.
I've got the Sentinel Comics tabletop RPG book that I bought during quarantine here, that I'm just waiting for things to open up just enough to play a tabletop campaign in that setting, because it's an absolute blast. It's like distilled comics. It's like everything that's like amped up to 20 comic book wise, all of the excesses of comics are played up, and it's such a blast.
Yeah, and a lot of the concepts are pretty unique. Like they have their version of Thor is basically an archaeologist finding the staff of the Egyptian god Ra, and then and so he's like imagine an Egyptian mythology version of Thor who has to fight the entire rest of the Egyptian pantheon as his regular villains is just one of the like 20 main characters of this series.
They have so many characters to pull from, like so many.
An incredible number. And oh Joe, I'm just racking my brain trying to think of one of their ideas. They have a character named Mr. Fixer, who is like an ancient Chinese master martial artist, maybe like an Iron Fist or a Lady Shiva or something. But he's also a janitor / superintendent, and his abilities are like so his weapons are like mops and wrenches, and his and
that would be fun.
yeah, and his abilities are equipping different weapons and martial arts styles and combining them to enhance your power moves. There's so many crazy concepts and that are so fun that an action RPG that's just that just throws 30 of these characters in somehow, I would 1000% play. And I've played the tabletop version, or I should say the card game based version, several times with mostly the same group of friends, and then the digital version thousands of times, because it's very easy to just pop in, play a 20-minute game, and pop right back out, even if you only have one or two of the 100 expansions. Not actually 100, but there's a lot of expansions online.
And it's such a good mix too, of like, this could very easily just be we're aping Marvel and DC at every step, but so many of these characters are feel wholly unique, even if they're playing off those tropes. Like my example is always the Scholar, right?
Oh yeah.
Like what kind of a wild, like, Florida Everglades wizard kind of guy is this, who's like this just mysterious entity who just looks like he rolled out of bed.
Yeah, like imagine an extremely online person, so like sort of heavyset, big beard, glasses, probably plays a lot of online card games, but he's also just a guru who uses that like the powers of probability and game design. Like he's basically like, what if a dungeon master was a player,
Yes.
was a player in the game and could manipulate the rules of the world around him, like in between a very stereotypical dungeon master versus an actual Gandalf is what he is. Like,
It's wonderful.
That's the kind of concept we're working with here. And again, a lot of the characters in it are pastiches of an existing Marvel or DC villain, like Voss is so obviously Darkseid from DC Comics.
Yes.
But they're fun enough and interesting enough that I would really like to play a more video game adaptation instead of an online instead of a video game version of the existing card game.
That would be a dream project.
We still have a few more fun things to discuss. Wes, what is your next choice for an adaptation?
Okay, we're going to go down the rabbit hole here and kind of continue the Cyborg 009 talk, because my next choice is Kamen Rider. And this one might require some explanation. Some people will know what it is. More people probably won't.
You say.
Now, Mike, I know this isn't in your wheelhouse, so I'll explain it slowly for you.
Thank you. Much appreciated.
Kamen Rider is a tokusatsu show, which is a genre that rose to prominence in Japan. That's, special effects heavy, kind of often superhero-esque, transforming heroes like you'd see in like Power Rangers or Super Sentai. Kamen Rider has a few gimmicks that make it unique. One being the rider portion, where they tend to ride motorcycles as a part of their hero. There's this idea where it's not just one big happy team a lot of the time. If there is more than one of these Kamen Rider heroes in a series, a lot of times there's some antagonism between them. There's a lot of interpersonal drama. It's this mix of melodrama with like absolute ridiculousness. The suits that these people wear are beloved because they're so over the top. They're based on these honestly very weird themes. You've got things like Kamen Rider X-Aid, which are based on the dueling themes of video games and like medical drama. And then you've got these older school ones that are like, it's a bug motif, and we're using that to tell, a story, and it goes, everything in between.
Yeah, in the very first Kamen Rider in 1971, an evil organization captures this college student, and they're going to turn him into a grasshopper monster because all their monsters are based on animals.
Yes.
But halfway through the procedure, he breaks free and becomes a hero working against them. And if that sounds a little bit like Cyborg 009, right down to the evil organization, that observation is totally fair.
You're not wrong. At least they came by it honestly, being the same creator. But it's a really fun series. It is definitely like, it is a, aimed at kids, but adults, tend to love it. There's this amazing design around it. There's some really good human stories that end up getting told in it. It's so, wide and varied and fascinating that, I can't get enough Kamen Rider in my life. If you ever see me on any video content, you'll see like models and whatnot behind me. But something that's been very prominent in more recent years, and by recent years I mean like 20 years, are crossovers. Every year you get some kind of crossover between like last year's Kamen Rider and this year's Kamen Rider, because each season is basically a self-contained story featuring its own heroes. But there are these little crossovers that are kind of fan service almost, and then big anniversaries will get huge overlaps that feature everyone up to that point a lot of times, and sometimes we'll even cross over with other semi-related shows.
Geez, sometimes not even semi-related shows. In one of the Kamen Rider Ghost crossover movies, they literally fight a giant Pac-Man, and they end up allying with Pac-Man to defeat the enemy Ghost because, maybe you know this, Pac-Man eats ghosts.
Little known fact. Good trivia for you.
You think I'm telling a joke, but that is 100% a theatrical film released in the neighborhood of 2016 to 2017. So yeah, go check it out.
It's an amazing series. It's over the top. It can take itself seriously while never taking itself too seriously. And I think that crossover is where a lot of the potential is, because everyone has their favorite rider, their favorite secondary rider, like their favorite characters from these shows, and like adding all of them into one, you're making a fighting game or a Warriors game or something like that at that point. But you take this small collection, you take a few series, mix them together, bring like a lot of characters from those together, you can make an original story but still have this it's almost visual spectacle is almost as important as anything, like the quality of the action, which is why this almost would have to land in action RPG land. And Kamen Rider's no stranger to video games, but specifically landing, something story driven, something RPG, something more flashy. Because a lot of times when I think of RPGs, I think that they are some of the more flashy games out there. They've got the room for these big elaborate cutscenes, or sometimes the moves, since it's okay to just pause the game and play an elaborate move animation, they can get away with these very well formed. You see stock footage in a lot of tokusatsu shows. Kamen Rider tends to avoid it, but they use similar attacks on a regular basis that are these big flashy iconic moves. And I think like the visual spectacle of it fits so well, and just the fact that this is a game for fans most likely. I can't imagine there being a ton of crossover appeal, which is why it's a dream game more than I don't think it's something we'd ever see in the West, if nothing else. But for those fans, you've got the shorthand already with these characters, and it allows you to tell stories within the context of characters that are already established.
I have played one Kamen Rider game at length, and again, this is a friend's copy, but we basically just spent 2 evenings playing the hell out of this thing. and I'm trying to. This is a couple years ago, so I hope I'm not getting any details wrong. It was Batride War Genesis, and the idea was there was some villain that was traveling through time to disrupt the origin of every Kamen Rider, so Kamen Rider would never exist, and the evil organization Shocker could take over the world. But the two problems with the plan were that Kamen Rider Ghost is already dead, so he can't be killed and interrupted. And also, Kamen Rider Den-O, which is the time traveling Kamen Rider, can't be erased from a timeline because of his unique powers. Kamen Rider Den-O has a few similarities with Link Click when you were describing that to us. Audra.
Yes.
I'm not surprised Wes maybe made a similar neurons firing in your brain. But,
absolutely.
But so Den-O, which is from the 2000s, and Ghost from the 2010s, sort of team up to undo the timeline and fix it and recruit every other Kamen Rider to fight this evil thing, which is again a very amusing crossover idea. And Kamen Rider has been deep into crossovers since the late 2000s. I think the old ones like Kuga and Agito didn't really have crossovers. Their movies were sort of standalone movies.
Yeah, they were semi-connected by nature, but not in a big canon way.
Yeah, but they started connecting them in a big canon way, maybe with Den-O, which is 2007-ish.
Yeah, I think that's arguably when they really kicked it in.
Because I know there's a Kiva versus Den-O movie, which is 07-08, but we don't need to go deep into it. Kamen Rider has so many characters and has done crossover movies so many times and some crossover games so many times. One that was more RPG ability focused and not just a throw all of your toys into a box and shake the box up and see which ones pour out kind of idea would be really, really good. They would probably have to focus on a smaller number of Kamen Riders and not all 45 or 50 or however many there have been over the years. Again, there's been about between 30 and 35 seasons, but a lot of seasons have multiple heroes, so the number is much higher than 30. Even if it was just recent ones or just old school ones or just an adaptation of Kamen Rider Black or which is an 80s one.
Yeah.
I would be into any of that, especially if it was RPG, especially if it had a lot of RPG elements and was, translated into English.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to lie. I will always play a turn-based RPG. If it were turn-based, I'd be ecstatic, but I feel like they would almost feel required because it's such an action-heavy series. Like, they want those big melees that writers get into, but it's a series that can do crossovers in a thoughtful way, and if there's one thing I dislike, it's crossovers in a less than thoughtful way, which sometimes Kamen Rider does. More famously, a lot of Dynasty Warrior spin-offs do, where it's just like, oh, a portal opened up and here's every Zelda character ever made.
Yeah, I would never accuse a Kamen Rider show or production being lazy because a stupid amount of work goes into all of them. But sometimes the crossovers feel a little bit lazy. Just like, hey, let's get all the suits that we still have in the Toei trailer that aren't water damaged and just throw them all out there.
Yeah, and I think there's room, especially when you're developing a game and there's such a life cycle, to have a really thoughtful crossover.
And I would be remiss not to mention, a couple of years ago, or I don't know how long, maybe it's several years ago by now, I don't understand time anymore, we did an episode on Chroma Squad, which is, it was by a Brazilian studio and mostly an homage to Super Sentai. But Chroma Squad has 3 endings, and one of the endings is 4 of the 5 main characters go missing, so the 5th remaining one gains new powers and a motorcycle, and the last chapter of the game is basically a Kamen Rider chapter.
Oh, wow.
It's so lovely.
It's a very, very cool idea. And I did not play through that ending, but I did watch YouTube videos of the 2 endings I didn't do. And it was it tickled me in a very specific way. Because I love Kamen Rider and Super Sentai. And while the 2 shows have a lot of similarities, there are enough differences to be able to appreciate both, and maybe unsurprisingly, I appreciate both. But I think, I would love to do a whole episode on Kamen Rider games, but that would be a little selfish of me to do so. Even more selfish of me doing that Chroma Squad episode so many years ago. But if Kamen Rider felt like Wes trying to directly appeal to me, Audra's last choice might also be attempting to directly appeal to me. So, Audra, what's your final adaptation idea for the episode?
It would actually be Street Fighter, which almost sounds really strange, but they actually did have a storytelling game.
Oh, it doesn't sound strange. Please continue.
I mean, I would love action RPG would be great, but I could also see a traditional RPG that has a Legaia combo based system where you input the combos.
Oh, I like that.
Oh.
Yes.
Oh, I like that a lot.
Or maybe even like a little bit like the on foot fighting in Xenogears.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Because people already, you could learn them and keep a record of which combos you've already mastered and combine them to make super moves. It would just be
Yeah.
really fun.
And if there's one thing Street Fighter's good at, it's super moves.
Yes.
But only since Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo.
I'd say that's long enough that we can call it an established pattern, though.
Sure. Yeah, I think so. Like, but how would they? Maybe you could spend extra MP to make a regular move into an EX move.
Ooh, yes.
Right. And I mean, you talk about character diversity. I mean, just the final version of Street Fighter 4 alone, I think, has about 50 or 55 characters in it. So you are spoiled for choice as to who makes it into the games. And I will play it as long as E Honda is in it somehow. God damn it.
Oh, he would have to be a main character.
Either a main character or he runs a sauna that gives you some important boosts. Those are your two options.
Yes, please.
That will take nothing less.
But yeah, I would just find it really fun to play through like a story mode for it.
That's something I want out of like almost every fighting game. Is I just want more of that story front and center. I'm a sucker for fighting game stories because you have to find a reason for this many characters to come together in something, and it delights me.
Yeah, and again, fighting game stories are mostly very dumb and usually afterthoughts. Some of the old in the 90s and earlier, most of fighting game stories were located in the manual, reading the character backstories. But I mean, come on, I mean, damned if I don't love a great like ending, like some slightly comic visual novel like scene. I recently played through the arcade modes of several characters for King of Fighters 15. Which came out in February, and like when you beat the game with the Southtown team, or no, I should say with the Fatal Fury team, it's Terry and Andy going on a double date with Blue Mary and Mai, and I'm like, I want a game that's just this. This is the best. Please insert this directly into my veins. So like you have fighting games like Street Fighter or King of Fighters with just iconic casts. Like even someone that doesn't play much Street Fighter can at least name a couple of the Street Fighter characters, because again, it's
Ryu or Chun-Li or
Ryu or Chun-Li or M. Bison or something, right? But these iconic characters with pretty awesome character designs, like if you picked 12 of them and threw them into a strategy RPG, I mean, I would play the hell out of that.
Oh my god.
Especially if they shout their moves aloud every time they do them, because that is something I love in every fighting game. Like, absolutely.
And something that speaks to me because I am a superficial person at times. I'm a sucker for like visual changes to your characters in games. So like if you've got a really robust equipment system, I'm a fan of that. Or if you've got characters with a lot of iconic costumes, that's something that appealed to me in like the X-Men Legends games and the Marvel Ultimate Alliance games. You've certainly got that with Street Fighter too. Like, please let me unlock it in the game instead of paying for it. But also, please let me be every variant of Ryu that's ever existed.
Yeah, maybe don't use the Street Fighter V fight money system that has you unlock characters piecemeal. Maybe don't do that. But but adding visual interest with costumes or move adjustments is very welcome.
I agree. And I think they could even throw in Rival Schools characters.
Sure. I mean, no, Akira made it into Street Fighter V, so there's a precedent for it.
Yeah.
Kyosuke made it into Capcom versus SNK 2, and Batsu made it into Tatsunoko versus Capcom. So yeah, there's plenty of Rival Schools precedent. And maybe listeners, maybe you've noticed this by now. I get a little bit weird about fighting game rosters and have sometimes encyclopedic knowledge of old Capcom games from 15 plus years ago. So yeah, talking about a potential Street Fighter RPG adaptation is 100% in my wheelhouse. Maybe don't bring back Sean from Street Fighter 3. I don't think he needs to come back.
Oh, nobody ever loved Sean.
Nobody. He is maybe the most eye-rolled character in Street Fighter history. But they give
me Dan, please.
They put Sean's older.
Oh yes, Dan could be a.
They put Sean's older sister into Street Fighter 5, and now she's really well liked. Her name's Laura.
Yep.
Oh yeah, she's awesome.
Yeah, it's like, wait a second. Based on Street Fighter lore, Brazilians have electricity powers, and we've never had a Brazilian jiu-jitsu character. So let's make our previous Brazilian character, Sean, have a sister with electric jiu-jitsu. Boom. It's like Capcom, I love you. Never change. So all right, okay. If I'm talking about Brazilian electricity martial arts, maybe we should move on a little bit. I do have one final idea here, and it's a little bit related to Street Fighter because it is a Capcom property, and it is a little bit related to Kamen Rider because it is about someone being modified to fight animal based supervillains. And and also it's a video game series that I'm already aware has one or two RPG adaptations. I want to talk about maybe my favorite platformer series of all time, Mega Man X. Not classic Mega Man, which I also love, or later Mega Man spin-offs like Legends or Zero, which I mostly like. But yeah, the original run of Mega Man X um, is one of my favorite things ever. I adore Mega Man X1 through X4.
Yes, please.
I like X5 well enough, and was pleasantly surprised by how non-bad X8 was. But let's not talk about X6 or X7. Mega Man X like goes to the fundamental ideas of Mega Man, where you're a robot who is smaller and less powerful than all the other villain robots. But every time you defeat a major villain, you gain their weapon. Mega Man X made some twists on the Mega Man formula by giving him body part upgrades that you find throughout the game, and you're able to charge up your enemy weapons so that they transform and have different effects. And there's just more collectibles and more and more sort of depth in older Mega Man games. And again, like X1 through X4, I adore and know backwards and forwards. X5, I like a lot. X8, I like a lot. X6 and X7, no thanks. But Mega Man X did have an RPG adaptation called Mega Man X Command Mission for, I believe, PS2, GameCube, and Xbox.
I know PS2 and GameCube.
But and that was pretty good. Where you have the three sort of main Mega Man X characters, X, Zero, and Axel, plus a couple new characters like Cinnamon, the medic robot, and I believe there's a gambler robot named Spider. If memory serves,
he gambits it up pretty hard.
That's right. There's and plus a couple more, and that as a concept, great. As execution, just maybe okay. But
that's fair.
My vision for Mega Man X hasn't had a new game in its series. I'm not counting the mobile versions like Mega Man Dive. It hasn't had a new game since X8, which was a late PS2 game. So something like 15 years ago, maybe longer. And what I think I want out of a Mega Man X game is I'm being influenced by recency bias, but I think of what are maybe the two best reviewed games of the past 6 or 7 years: Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild and Elden Ring.
Oh my goodness, right, we're going here.
Wow.
Yeah, so envision a classic Mega Man or Mega Man X boss select screen, but instead of 8 bosses, it's eight large maps, and you from your mission control you jump into a map, and in each map there are hidden upgrades, maybe 3 or 4 classic bosses, each of which confer a weapon, maybe some classic, some newly designed for the game, and basically just giving you an open world Mega Man where you can find as much equipment and weapons and items as you can the more you explore. With no true leveling up, but just a wealth of customization options for like a Mega Man of the 2020s. And I don't need to go too deep into theory crafting for this, but I think that a Mega Man that gave players some freedom in gameplay choice and also made weapons the kind of thing that you can use freely instead of trying to conserve your weapon energy like a bleary-eyed hoarder. Because I mean, many Mega Man players, including myself sometimes, just does Mega Buster all the time unless the boss is weak against it kind of deal.
Yep.
Yeah, but like something that gives you a lot of weapon customization and freedom and skill customization and armor customization, going into maybe this is a slightly Mario 64 thing, like 8 medium-sized or even small open worlds instead of one giant contiguous open world, because I still want that Mega Man X select screen.
Yeah, and make them dense. Like, you can be small but dense.
Yeah, and I'm thinking cool. Like at least 30 bosses that give you weapons, some new, some classic. Maybe like some secret ultimate badass mission that has you fight, I don't know, like Vile with the ride armor from X3 or Colonel from X4. like I don't care. Like just a Mega Man X semi-open world game with a lot of customization and some homages and references would be maybe my dream video game, full stop.
And there's this history that really speaks to some of that customization. Like the idea that armor customization in Mega Man X has always been a big thing, and it's become, in later entries, it becomes more and more prominent, where it's not just I'm upgrading my armor, but you have some choices that are going to affect how you play a little bit. All of these different super moves that they add, the different weapons. Man, I would never have thought of this, but it's a surprisingly good fit.
It wouldn't even have to be 2D. If it's 3D over the shoulder, vaguely like a Ratchet and Clank game, or I don't know, Jet Force Gemini or something, I'll play that too. I really think there's a lot of potential in a Mega Man open world game, specifically Mega Man X.
I'm with you. Like, I don't know anything else, but
yeah, that sounds awesome, actually.
And geez, what was the last proper Mega Man X sighting we had? I'm slightly ashamed to think it was maybe his inclusion in Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite.
That's what I was just thinking. I think that might be the last time. Again, outside of mobile games.
Yeah, again, Mega Man, I think Mega Man X Dive, or maybe it's just Mega Man Dive, is doing pretty well, but I do not need another gacha in my life. I'm already devoting way too much of my life to the one gacha I indulge in. But I don't need another.
And I'm not trying to platform on touch controls. My hands can't do it. Yeah. They're old and infirmed.
I'm not going to pick a platform for my theoretical Mega Man X open world game, but my vote is not mobile phones.
I think that's a blanket statement for all entries today. Let's just go ahead and say that.
Well, all right. Each of us presented 3 ideas for a potential adaptation into a hypothetical future RPG, but I did say there was going to be one surprise at the end, and so I'm going to explain that a little bit. We just mentioned Marvel vs. Capcom a short time ago, and I think I even mentioned Marvel vs. SNK and Tatsunoko vs. Capcom before, because again, I love Capcom fighting games, and we even mentioned Kamen Rider crossovers. There is a history of video game crossovers, like in Namco X Capcom is a pretty good RPG one of those. I want you to take 2 fictional worlds, it can be something brand new or something we've already discussed, and come up with an idea of just a crossover RPG between those worlds and what kind of game it would be.
Oh, what have you done to us, Mike? What have you done to us?
Oh, wow.
This is a big ask. It's not very fair. So I'm going to go first. And we did talk about how fighting games have ridiculous stories that are all not very fleshed out within games a lot of the time. I think maybe the best fighting game story that has a lot of continuity and a lot of drama and a lot of character diversity is maybe surprisingly coming from a Capcom head like me. I think it's Mortal Kombat. Mortal Kombat has developed a really epic saga over the years with some spin-offs, but really it's the Mortal Kombat 9, X, 11 trio in the 2010s have really established what the Mortal Kombat canon is, because Mortal Kombat 9 back in the PS3 days really is an adaptation of Mortal Kombat 1, 2, and 3 reinterpreted. So like Mortal Kombat, it's done very well with their story design over the years. So a Mortal Kombat RPG crossed over with, wait for it, I think I have to cross it over with something like Dark Souls or Elden Ring. Because when I think
of that would make sense.
Yep.
When I think of a bleak, brutal RPG that's very gameplay focused, I that's what I think of. Like imagine you playing an Earthrealm soldier or a Lin Kuei assassin or an Adenian warrior or something, going around an open world fighting a bunch of Mortal Kombat characters in the sort of brutal, dark world of recent From Software. I think that's the kind of action RPG that that Mortal Kombat deserves. So like, and maybe there's throwing some Elden Ring or Dark Souls classic monsters and bosses in there as well. Like having I don't know, like maybe you've defeated Sub-Zero and Scorpion, so you have Scorpion's spear and Sub-Zero's ice powers, and you have to fight Sif the giant wolf from Dark Souls. I think that sounds like something that would make a few gamer brains explode in the 2020s. So that's my idea for a crossover. Either Wes or Audra, what's your idea for a ridiculous off-the-cuff crossover?
I had an idea for one that I was going to add to my list that we discussed briefly, but I didn't have a good way to like connect it as a full-featured game. And this crossover just hit the nail on the head so perfectly. So Final Fantasy loves to take itself very seriously and really like play up the melodrama, and they also love big production value. They want I think if they could like cast stars for their games and have it like, okay, this character is just this movie actor, I think that they would like pull the trigger if they could like pull that off for an entire game. And I say we give them the chance by crossing over Final Fantasy with the Blood and Ice Cream or Cornetto trilogy from Edgar Wright.
Oh yeah, listeners, that's Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz, and At World's End. 3 very fun, very good movies.
And I say you take that style that you have from that Cornetto trilogy, where everything is like played up big time. It is definitely a comedy, but it still works as its own individual story. It still wants you to believe. Like Hot Fuzz still wants to say like you can watch this as an action movie. Shaun of the Dead still wants to say you can watch this as a zombie movie, even though that's not really the point when you look at it. And apply that writ large to the melodrama of Final Fantasy. Even do the casting. Like give me the 4 Warriors of Light as Simon Pegg, Nick Frost, Patty Considine, and Jessica Stevenson or something. Like give me those big time Edgar Wright collaborators that have been in a lot of their stuff. Give me those as the Warriors of Light and riff on the very concept of this melodrama while still telling human stories about those characters, which is something Final Fantasy wants to do anyways. I think that the crossover has unlocked the hidden power of the Cornetto trilogy RPG.
Now, they would obviously have to have ice creams as the healing item.
Yes.
But I hope that like dragging Final Fantasy characters into an action movie basically isn't describing Strangers of Paradise or Stranger of Paradise.
Oh no! I need this to play like a traditional Final Fantasy if I want it to work.
Okay, all right.
I want this to be like close to PS1 era, maybe, where it's like that traditional turn-based. You can evolve it. We've had a lot of good turn-based since then, but I need this to be turn-based and like cutscene heavy and side quest heavy. Like I need commentary on every bit of the traditional Final Fantasy formula to be built up in this story.
I mean, I love Edgar Wright movies and I love Final Fantasy, so somehow mashing those together is fascinating, although a little confusing.
I've got a picture in my head, and it is wild, but there is nothing I love more than wildly ambitious projects that might not be able to pull it off.
All right, so that was Wes's pitch for Final Fantasy X Cornetto or Blood and Ice Cream trilogy is what I always called it. Audra, what is your idea for a crossover RPG to end the episode?
Ooh, actually, it's a weird one, but probably Ys with Pirates of Dark Water.
Oh, right.
Oh, yes.
Oh, Pirates of Dark Water. Okay. First
Bringing
of all,
it home, Audra.
Audra, before you go into this, I legit considered putting Pirates of Dark Water on my list, like just for the regular part of this episode. No kidding. Because as a child, I was furious. They were looking for, I think, 13 treasures to stop the dark.
And they only found a couple.
They only found 7, and then they ended the series. I was so mad at Hanna-Barbera at the time for doing that to me. But anyway, please continue. Pirates of Dark Water cross Ys.
It would be, you'd have like all the Adel and all the Ys characters, and you could just kind of throw in the general plot of Dark Water with the Dark Water attacking the land and stuff, and just I could see it being a good mishmash kind of adventure.
Yeah, it was a fantasy adventure / pirate cartoon from the late 80s, early 90s, done by Hanna-Barbera Studio that probably some of the same Thundarr the Barbarian, Herculoids kind of people, where there was a black morass of water that was slowly swallowing the whole world like an evil sentient oil slick or something. And most of the characters were maritime based. They were sailors and pirates and evil pirates, and they would go from island to island going on adventures looking for the 13 treasures that could stop the Dark Water. It ended prematurely, very frustrating to me, but there's one problem with your idea, Audra. That's because it's Adal Christin on a water world full of boats. It would only last one episode.
But that would be, he could shipwreck, and that would how he'd meet everyone.
Sure, yeah, probably, and I'm sure Dogi can carry him to shore or carry him to a friendly ship.
What impresses me is that like the sense of and definition of adventure in those two properties is so similar. Like it just fits together so well.
Yes.
Like what adventure means to Adal is very similar to like what adventure means in the Pirates of Dark Water as a whole.
Yes.
I'm not kidding. I almost had Pirates of Dark Water on my list instead of Redwall. Like, no joke. I thought about it. It's like, I don't know if there's enough juice here. I'll find something else. But yeah, you
Audra
brought
covered
it
us.
home. Yeah, you brought us home, Audra. Absolutely.
Yay!
But okay, if I am talking about my childhood frustrations with a early 90s Hanna-Barbera cartoon, maybe it's time to end the episode. Thank you so much for joining us on discussion of 12 plus intellectual properties that we would like to see adapted into RPGs. This is a goofy, what's the right word here? A goofy fan casting episode that's all hypothetical and none concrete. But this is the kind of thing that's fun to talk about, so we might as well podcast about it. But listeners, if you want to find out what else we're podcasting about in the months of March and April, I'm here for you. Next week, I think we're doing. I'm trying to suss out the schedule here. Next week, I believe, is our episode on Salt and Sanctuary, the action RPG that's a lot Dark Souls and a little Metroidvania, to cap off our Metroidvania March month. Month of March Metroidvania. I'm not sure what the right order of alliteration is there, but that's a game that I finished pretty recently, and have a lot of thoughts about. So that's going to be a very interesting episode to record very soon. And in April, we haven't planned out most of the month yet, but we are going to have 2 episodes on Final Fantasy 13, a game that, perhaps surprisingly, because I've played a lot of RPGs, have not played at all. I played less than 30 minutes of the Final Fantasy 13 trilogy in my life. So I'm going to be making a sincere attempt at it very soon.
So excited.
Oh boy. Well, we'll see how far I get. I hope I can keep up my streak of actually finishing games for the podcast. But Final Fantasy 13 is our official game journal for April. But listeners, if you want to reach out to us about Final Fantasy 13 or Salt and Sanctuary or Metroidvania games or Pirates of Dark Water or anything else, the best way to reach us is to email retro@rpgfan.com. You can also comment on the RPG Fan message boards, visit our Facebook page, our Discord, our YouTube, our Twitch, our Twitter. Anything called RPG Fan or RPG Fan.com is typically us. We also have 3 other fine podcasts on RPG Fan: Random Encounter every 2 weeks about randomness, Rhythm Encounter every 2 weeks about RPG music, and Phoenix Edge, currently on hiatus, our partner podcast hosted by Hatton Eric, usually recorded live on YouTube, usually about current events in RPGs. You can review Retro Encounter or those other 3 on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, whatever venue you choose. We will be there. Please leave feedback. We love feedback. But listeners, if you want to reach out to us individually and not as a website or a podcast, let's tell them how, starting with you, Wes.
For the most part, your best bet is to find me at Wes Iliff on Twitter. That'll link you to everything else.
Now, Audra.
Audra B at rpgfan.com.
Now, Sollosi. Hey, you can find me on social media, for the most part on Twitter. I am at The Real Monsoon most of the time, at Evoca for Dogs other times, and on RPG Fans Discord, I am Monsoon Mike. So thank you so much, Wes and Audra, for getting real weird about things from our childhood or recent adulthood and how they might make a great RPG. And yes, somehow we managed to link Kamen Rider, Cyborg 09, and Mega Man X together, and I didn't even plan it that way.
It's mysterious.
Listeners, thank you, good night, and good luck.